podcast where I, Sean, embark on a journey to understand what's happening in my own head. Spoiler alert, I have no clue, but that's precisely why we're here. In each episode, I explore questions about the brain that I believe will resonate with all of us. Like, why can't I turn my brain off at 3 a.m.? Why my memory only works when it feels like it? And why my brain seems to betray me when I need it most. Listen, I'm not a scientist. I'm no expert. I'm just a guy looking to unravel the mysteries of my own mind. Fortunately, I happen to know a cognitive neuroscientist who is an expert in the brain, and I get to ask him all the questions I want. So, if you're curious, confused, or simply along for the ride, welcome. And hey, if you like what you hear, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to the podcast, or whatever it is you do wherever you listen to podcasts. I don't know how the algorithms work. I just know that your support keeps this journey moving forward. And together, we might just discover something remarkable. This is John Teaches Sean about his brain. Let's get started. Hi, John. It's good to see you.
Hey, Sean. It's great seeing you. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. Just curious as I always am. What is on your mind this week?
I've had a few things on my mind, but and I was trying to think about what to share at this segment. And I think the one that's been on my mind maybe the most, or I've thought the most about, was an article in a journal called The Conversation. And it's just where different experts in different fields bring up something that they're studying or researching and talk about it. So it's kind of an interesting site. A neuroscientist, he's a developmental neuroscientist named Eamon McCrory from the UK, wrote an article that I thought was really interesting. It fits in with several of the topics that we've had here in our podcast, but it's about how harsh words to children can create a lifelong impact on them. So if you routinely, and this is based on his research and others' research, but if you routinely use harsh language to try to like humiliate or shame a child when you're upset to try to control them, or if you criticize them all the time really harshly, if you threaten them or reject them, saying you're not worth anything, those types of things. So it's not just like curse words. It's other words like being belittled or shamed or ridiculed, frightened, those types of things, that it has long-term effects on brain development. And they also pointed out that this is not the same thing as if occasionally, once in a while, you lose your temper and you're like, "What are you doing?" to your yelling at them like that, where it's just a short, and it very rarely happens. As long as it's not that changes brain development, because that would be difficult for everybody to never have that moment. So it's just that pattern of consistent, constant behavior over and over, and they're talking about it as it's actually verbal abuse. It's a form of child abuse that's never really talked about. It's never, our social systems don't set that up to punish people for that. If you hear somebody yell at their kid, you just kind of go, but if you see them hit their kid, you're like, hey, you can't do that. But, yelling at them's different. But the consequences later, it changes how children see themselves and see others. It affects their relationships in adulthood. It's very difficult for them to trust people. They a lot of times they end up with anxiety and depression, and a lot of these are anxiety disorders. And they've followed children and looked at all of these. It's changes in the brain really that happen. And it's based on mostly in how because we've talked about the amygdala and the fight, flight, freeze system.
Mm-hmm.
It's how it changes how that wires itself, because now it's a constant danger or nearly constant danger. And so that part of the brain takes over much more control and it's given much more weight in a person as they develop. Like, I've got to listen to this system more. So that's what builds anxiety and stress, and they can't trust people. It's really, the amygdala becomes hyperactive in adulthood.
Hyperactive, yeah.
It has some really, really, bad effects on children when they grow up.
So I don't know if you how deep you went into this article, but how do they research that? I
Yeah,
mean, are
so
we in a lab telling kids they're worthless when they're little, and then just see? I'm kidding. I'm
I
joking,
shouldn't laugh at
obviously, but
that, but
I'm sorry.
yes,
That was my fault. But no,
yeah,
I mean, do you know or have any ideas about how
yeah,
you might study this?
yeah. I could see researchers and lab coats with clipboards yelling at children.
Yeah,
That's not
that's
how you study it. But it is. It's more. It's so this article doesn't. It gives their research background, kind of the findings without all the details, but it gives
okay.
the findings and the direction and all of that. But I do know that the research in this area is almost always done with people who are adults, where they're filling out questionnaires about their childhood,
Okay.
and then looking back, and then it goes further than that, because then there's confirmation. A lot of times when you're studying this, especially when you are involving MRI, fMRI,
fMRIs, yeah.
and
You've talked
neuroimaging.
about this.
Yeah, when you're taking a look at the brain and the brain structure and how the brain functions using neuroimaging, then it's almost always followed up with other things as well, like interviews with parents, with family members, with other people around. So it's a small sample,
Hmm.
usually a dozen, a few dozen maybe, and then because they have to follow up with research and other things like that. But it's uh, but then it ties. It looks at that there will be a control group as well, and then it looks at differences and changes based on the background information you get from them.
And you're talking about physical changes to the brain.
Yes, yes,
I mean, that's the part we've talked about neuroplasticity and I mean the idea that's what I keep coming back to when you bring something up like this, the physical changes in the brain.
yeah. That is always surprising to me. Like, I'm always going, "Wow, that
Yeah.
changed the brain," and then I always remind myself, "Well, of course, it had to have changed the brain, because if you're acting differently, your brain is functioning, something has changed in your brain. So of course there's going to be changes to your brain, because you're behaving differently, you're seeing things differently. So
Yeah.
yes, it's going to have an effect on your brain, but it still always amazes me to think about it, that how we're talking to kids, how we're uh, interacting with them is shaping their brain development, and making them who they are later in the world. Maybe not making them who they are, but drawing the box kind of what they're going to be with inside that box. People still have chances to better themselves, and to try things better. But man, when you put your brain on autopilot, which is where most of us live almost all the time, and some people don't make an effort to take it off autopilot very often. So if it's just autopilot, then your future is being determined by how you're treated as a child.
Yeah. I mean, every serial killer movie that I've ever seen, they had a bad mom that,
Yeah,
treated them poorly. Uh, but so you're going back to the study, you're saying it's not like these little explosions, like, you lose your temper and you yell at a child, which you shouldn't, you shouldn't do anyway. But
mm-hmm.
because what I'm taking from what you're saying, even that, those are more minor effects, but that has effect on the
Yeah.
child, right?
I mean, okay, so it depends on how big of an explosion it is, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
If you get frustrated and go, "What are you doing? What in the world?" and then you back off, say, "Hey, you're okay. This is okay. We're going to fix this," and then you move on. They can also learn some positive things out of that, as long as you're positive after that. Like you get frustrated and you can quickly turn it around. So they're
Mm,
learning when we're frustrated, we don't have to hold on to that for 8 hours and pout and yell at people for 8 hours. We can get frustrated and turn that around quickly. So that could even be positive for a child.
yeah.
But especially if other times you're building them up, this comes down to, I don't know. I always hesitate a little bit in sharing things and talking about things because what you say can be construed in a lot of different ways. So I'm
Yeah.
going to try to just say it in straightforwardly as I can. But I had kids that played sports, and you would hear coaches say, these kids need to be toughened up, or I'm going to toughen them up. Or I would hear other parents say, I want to raise my kid tough. I want my
Mhm.
kid to be tough. And almost every time they say that, it means I'm going to ride them hard. I'm going to yell at them. I'm going to be on their case. They would know they are going to learn that they have to really line up all the time. And, my first thought is, well, how about lead by example? Because you're not really that put together yourself or lined up. Sometimes a lot of
Yeah.
people who say that, but then also that's not what that does. That turns into a child having trust issues later in life, being able to adjust properly, knowing what relationships are supposed to look like, because then it's hard to know how to interact with other people when you've been raised tough by being yelled at all the time. It's like, well, what's my relationship supposed to be with people? Do I yell at everybody that I love and am friends with, or just the ones who are going to be athletes? Or how do I just, and your back channel doesn't do that. It doesn't distinguish between that. It just
Yeah.
it makes it really difficult for everybody. So I think
Yeah, but
that
they might make the NFL if we
there
raise
yeah
them.
there are things worse than missing the NFL.
Have you, just a side note to that, though, because it just sparked a thought. Are you familiar with Todd Marinovich, who that
Yes,
is?
the quarterback, right?
He was a
For a
quarterback
while.
for a while, and then he had some problems.
For the Raiders maybe at one
The
point.
Raiders, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But his dad, from the time that this child was born, his dad raised him to be an NFL football player. There's a documentary, a really interesting documentary, that I watched about this, the Marinovich Project, I think. But you can find it. But anyway, he was giving him frozen, kidneys to chew on in the crib. He put a football in there. You got to watch the documentary. But he
Okay.
raised him. His dad, he had him doing drills when he was, 4 or whatever, and his whole life was, everything was football, and his dad raised him to be a football player. But he raised him tough. That's what kind of connecting it to what you're saying is my little offhand joke about they'd make the NFL. Well, I mean, there's evidence of at least one guy who was raised from birth to, just out of college to be an NFL football player, and he was a good one
Hmm.
for like 3 or 4 years, and then he had some real bad personal problems, and
Hmm.
I'm not saying that's causation or correlation, just that it was interesting that how he was
Yeah.
raised,
It would be interesting to know how many other dads raise their sons to be NFL football players
and they didn't make
that
it.
we've never heard of. Because,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah, again, not to get too personal, but just on kids' teams, I know a lot of them that were raised to be in the NFL and the NBA that,
didn't make
were
it.
no, not even a college
Yeah,
scholarship really. So, but then that's hard because now you put so much pressure and so much stuff on a kid from 3 years old to 15, and their childhood is gone basically, and it's like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. So I'm not sure everybody's self-reflective enough to wonder if they should have done it or not, but it's okay to be. I think man, I'm trying to remember who said this. There's a famous basketball player, and by famous I mean well, has received all honors and won lots of things in the NBA, like player of the year and defensive player of the year. I'm trying to think who it is. Anyway, they asked him about, coaching his son. He said, "Oh no, I'd never be my son's coach in basketball. I'm my son's dad. There's other people that can coach my son. I'm his dad." And I'm like,
yeah,
wow, that is awesome, because then you can keep that relationship. And then if a coach is hard on a kid, but yet at home he feels supported and there's that strong network, then it's not as bad if somebody else is hard on the kid. It still shouldn't be, but it's not as bad. But if you're the coach and the dad, and yeah, it just makes it hard. So
Yeah.
this is the scientific evidence kind of behind that words matter thing that you talk
Thank
about,
you.
because it's
My house
abuse.
motto:
Yeah.
words
Physical
matter.
abuse, we say, oh no, you can't do that. But we forget that words matter, and there shouldn't
Yeah.
be verbal abuse either. So it was a good article to read, and something that's been on my mind.
No, that's a great point, because you already said this, but if you're out in public and you see an adult, physically strike a child, I think we're more apt to speak up or do something. But you're out in public and there's a parent or a guardian or an adult who is just saying horrible things to a child.
Mhm.
I don't know that as many people are going to be walk over and go, "Hey, stop talking to that child that way."
It, I think they might, if they're cursing them out, like
Yeah,
loudly cursing
yeah,
them
but
out.
I
You go,
just mean,
wait,
like, what are you doing? You're useless. Go put that
yeah,
back. Are you dumb? I'm
yeah,
trying to think of like something really egregious that you shouldn't say to a child. But if you're in a store and there's a parent saying those things to a child, I feel like most people would be less likely to intervene in that, as opposed to them grabbing them and like hitting them
yeah,
or something like
absolutely.
that. But you're saying if that enough of that type of language to a child um, over a long enough period of time changes the brain structure, that is going to carry with them into adulthood.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like criticisms all the time. Like, why would you do that? That was stupid. Why would you do that? Like,
Yeah.
and you did, oh, that you didn't do very much. That didn't hurt you. You didn't work very hard. That
Mm.
wouldn't have hurt you. Oh, you have no idea. I work so much harder than you. You do nothing. You're so lazy. You're just lazy. You sit around all the time. And it's just constant barrage of that. It's like, what are you doing? You're shaping their brain right now.
Yeah.
You're forming their personality that they're going to have with them for the rest of their life. So congratulations for being the co-engineer of a child that's going to struggle for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. It's funny because my wife and I were just talking about this. I go back and forth all the time with this nature and nurture idea,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the genes that you're born with based on just like science. You have a parent, two parents, and they have, right. So we know you got all that. You're born with a set kind of mix of DNA and genetics and all that. And then, so that's half of it or so. But then you also have this environment in which you're raised. And that's the formula for the most part. Because I'm saying that because there are stories of kids who were born into horrible conditions and still thrive later
Mm-hmm.
on in life.
Mm-hmm.
I would say genes, whatever they were born with, that just made them, that they could adapt, that they could overcome, they could do these things. But then, there's also kids born into decent, so there's just this mix of like, uh, the way you're born and then the environment that you're raised
Mm-hmm.
has just so much effect later in life.
It really does. And you're right, because you can see it even in the same household
Yeah.
where you have one child.
Siblings. Yep.
Yes, that's so conscientious and tries to do everything by the rule, and the other one is just trying to break every rule. And you just go, wow, they're really different. Why? And it's one of the things that made me think when I was an undergrad in psychology, uh, Dr. Rohr, I think was her name. It was in developmental psych. She said, you and your siblings, every one of you were raised in a different home. Basically, you had different parents. You
Right.
think it's the same parents, but it's not, because the parents that had that first child, it's two people with an only child, and they're acting and doing things one way, and then a second child comes along, and now those are different dynamics. So
Mm-hmm.
now that second child is entering a home that's different than the first child entered, and then the third child, and so on. So even though the
Yeah.
differences are subtle, there might not be big differences. It's a little bit different each time. So some of it still could be nurture, the difference in two children. And I know that's like our first child. We were so protective of Sierra, like guarding her, like shushing people if they were making too much noise when she was taking a nap. We even hung a sign on the door like "Don't knock, baby sleeping," and
Mhm.
and then by the second one, we're like, while they're sleeping in their crib, we're lifting up the edge of it and vacuuming under it, and like
Yeah.
it's so different. So I know you raise
Our
them
first
differently.
child, I would have wrapped him in bubble wrap for the first 15 years if we could have, like just, and then, we had the second child, and she was like, she's fine. She's going to
Yeah,
be fine. And she is, thankfully, but I
they
just
both
mean that
are.
they're both great, but I just mean we did just the difference between those children.
Mhm.
Um, did raise them differently, and they're 2 years apart or so,
Yeah, yeah,
2 or 3 years apart, but
yeah.
that's funny that you say that because that is so true.
Yeah,
That's so
so there's
true.
still nurture to it, but there's that nature because they have different genes. They have, and then what you experience determines which genes are expressed and how and that
Yeah.
type of thing. So it's really both. It's hard to separate on almost every level. It's both.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I was really enjoying that, but that's not what I wanted to ask you this week.
Okay.
Sorry. No. A couple of episodes ago, we were talking about vision,
Hmm.
and last but
Last
you
episode.
last episode we've
Hmm.
talked about vision for a few episodes now,
Hmm.
right? And but you said something in that episode that I want to go back to. I would be
Good.
remiss in my duties here if I didn't go back and ask this question. You said, and correct me if I get this wrong, but my memory of what you said was that vision, a little part of the information coming in through vision, is tied to your internal clock.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so number one, that's what I really want to get a little bit deeper into.
Okay.
And I don't know if you said it then, but I think the other thing I want to ask you about is, and then this is all kind of tied into one big package, but about how vision plays with, or how it affects your circadian rhythm.
Hmm.
We're back to sleep again, even though I know that's not your particular area. But so can we go back and can you talk a little bit? Can you tell me a little bit more about vision and its effect on your internal clock?
Yes. And I said good when you said we're going to go back to vision. We've been there a couple of episodes, but that's like one of my favorite topics. So
Oh, good.
I love talking
Good.
about vision, different parts of vision. And I think what we were talking about was tracing information when light reflects off objects and strikes the eye and where it
Mhm.
goes. And I said there's a small bit because we talked about the high road and the low road that
Yes.
the bulk of it goes to create your conscious awareness, the image that you're aware of, but some of it goes to the limbic system, the amygdala, and that low road to give you a quick assessment. Are you safe? And those types of things. And then I said there's a even smaller amount that goes to reset your internal clock.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so there are, after your photoreceptors, and so we're going to the retina of the eye. And in the retina, where light comes through the eye and strikes the retina, there's different receptor cells. We talked about rods and cones.
Rods and codes.
And so
Cones. Yep.
then they'll absorb photons of light and then send signals, and they go through another layer to three layers. They amacrine and bipolar and those type of cells, and then they arrive at the ganglion cells. There's a cell called a ganglion cell that connects to multiple or receives input, I should say, from multiple photoreceptors like cones or rods. And then its tail, the ganglion cell's axon, its tail is what makes up the optic nerve. So the other cells are really short, and they just send right in the retina, in that tiny little space. There's a few messages going around, but then when the ganglion cell gets that message, its axon sends it back, and it's the axon that carries it to the high road, low road, or to this area for the internal clock. And so there's a certain type of photosensitive retinal ganglion cell that it contains melanopsin. So you've heard of melanoma. So it's a
Oh,
melanopsin.
melanoma. Yeah, but
Yeah.
melanop. Say the word again.
Well, it's melanopsin. It's an opsin.
Melanopsin.
Yeah,
Okay.
so like the
Okay.
neurotransmitters, but related to so it's related to that. So it's it's particularly sensitive to short wavelengths of light, like the blue lights. So it's more likely to fire to blue lights, and its axon, its tail, travels to the midbrain to an area called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or easier to say, the SCN. The SCN.
SCN.
The SCN is like the hypothalamus. And that SCN is kind of the master clock of the brain. And
Oh,
so it's receiving input from those ganglion cells to reset the phase of your sleep wake cycle.
okay.
And I mentioned that if you put people in a cave or in a completely dark area where there's no light and they don't have access to candles or computers or phones or just blackness,
Yeah.
that the body runs on about a 25-hour cycle, something like that, 25 and a half hours or something.
Hmm.
But it's light that resets that phase each time to put us into a 24-hour rhythm. And so it's the especially blue light will reset that rhythm. Um, and if you have more light in the morning and after, like sunlight's the best way to reset it because that keeps you on a good schedule. And if you have more morning light, then it phase shifts you to where you wake up earlier and you go to sleep sooner. But if you have lights of an evening, that phase shifts you the other way. And this is where it can be a problem with sleep. If people have trouble sleeping, like if you're trying to go to sleep and you can't sleep, what's the first thing you do? And I don't mean you specifically, but people
No,
pull
but
their
I
phone out.
look at your phone,
Yeah, just check your
right?
phone.
I can't sleep. I'm going to try to kind of like get tired, so to speak. So I'm going to just scroll on my phone.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the LED screen lights that come out are mostly that blue light that the ganglion cells pick up to
Interesting.
reset your clock. So now all of a sudden it goes, oh, it's light, it's wake time. So now it's even harder to go to sleep because now
Hmm.
your body's trying to reset its clock to say we need to get up and be moving. Then you find yourself like really awake, going, man, this stinks. It's 2:30 in the morning and I am so wide awake right now. And I know that, it might take me till 3:30 now to go to sleep. And then my alarm's set for 6 or, whatever. It's
Yeah.
like, and then you start feeling pressure like, I'm not going to get any sleep tonight. And it's a lot of times it's because of that light.
But so the other thing, then you said LED screens. I'm assuming televisions give off a
Same
similar
way.
blue light.
Yep.
So
Well,
sleeping with the television on?
yeah. And people used to call it old blue eye. I don't know if you ever heard that. They would
No.
call it blue eye because it gives that blue radiation coming out of a television, especially older
Okay.
ones. But yeah, if you sleep with your television on, that can cause problems because even with your eyelids closed, light still gets through.
Yeah, you can still sense some light,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
I mean, again, we're human beings, the way that we're kind of wired to. When the sun comes up, we wake up. When the sun goes down, we go to sleep. Kind of, I know that's an oversimplification, but like that's the
That's kind
cycle.
of, yes. Yeah. And that's, there's different ideas on why that is, like evolutionarily speaking and all
Right,
that.
right.
But it does, that's how we're set. That's kind of how our clocks reset. But then that blue light actually suppresses melatonin. So that's where the melatonin comes in. And that's created by the pineal gland, and it releases melatonin, which brings on sleep onset. So the blue light stops the production of melatonin, which brings
Melatonin,
sleep onset, meaning it's more difficult to go to sleep.
because it is the reason that it is stopping the melatonin because it's saying it's daytime. We need to be
Hmm.
awake. You can't
Yeah,
sleep now.
right. The light's
Even
just
though
coming up.
it's 2 o'clock in the morning, like your non-conscious brain doesn't really know that it's light and dark,
Yeah.
sunlight and darkness. And then we've introduced all of these artificial kind of lights into this.
Yep.
And so now I'm up at 2 in the morning. I'm death scrolling, doom scrolling on my phone.
Hmm.
And then I can't fall asleep until 3, whatever, right? I fall
Hmm.
asleep. And then the sun comes up or my alarm goes off and I wake up, and then throughout the day, I'm tired,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And I have to go to work, so I'm at work, but I'm super tired. And so what's happening during that day? See, I'm deficient in sleep.
Yeah, that causes so many secondary problems.
Like,
So, like, it interrupts cognitive function. So you have reduced attention.
there we go.
It's much
Yes.
harder to pay attention to things. You have loss of memory, or without sleep is when you consolidate your memories. We talked several episodes ago about
Learning.
encoding,
Yeah.
consolidating, and those types of things. So just you can't encode information, so it's going to be more difficult to remember. Plus, your attentional system, you need attention to gather information to remember. You have slower reaction times. Um, Decision making and learning are impaired. And in fact, reaction times, I think, is something like, with, I don't remember the number, but there's a number saying if you're sleep deprived by this many hours and you're driving your vehicle, it's like
It's
driving
like
at
being drunk. I've heard
point
that. I've
eight,
heard
yeah,
that. Yeah.
0.08 or something. Yeah.
Um, but so I would assume then more prone to accidents, like
Yes.
mental errors that cause an accident.
Yeah, absolutely. And it affects mood.
Oh,
People are more
oh,
irritable,
okay.
emotionally unstable, and
So here's
so,
what I'm trying to do, and this may be a colossal failure on my part, but I'm trying to, as always, I'm trying to weave together all of the information that you've given me over all of these episodes, right? And so what my brain is just like grabbed onto is, see if I can do this succinctly, right? But I work at a manufacturing company, just not a particular one, but a manufacturing company,
mhm.
and they bring us in for safety training, and I sit in a room for 4 hours with a whole bunch of coworkers, and they tell my on channel a bunch of information,
Mhm.
and and then I go home at the end of the shift, and I'm watching TV, sleep with the TV on, can't sleep, wake up, scroll on my phone. And I do that for a couple of days. So number one, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the training I received that day, I didn't, I wasn't really, I paid attention to it is my point, but I didn't sleep well. So consolidation was not great as far as memory consolidation of the training received. And then also um, just the delivery system isn't the most efficient or the most effective. The talking to us in the room, and then I don't sleep, and then I go to work the next couple of days or whatever. That information, I didn't really retain that information. On top of that, I'm tired. I'm not paying attention like I should be,
Mhm.
and
My
and
reaction time slower.
reaction time, right? Like all of those things happen. That could be in the instance I'm being very specific, could lead to accidents. Like I could get injured or worse.
Yeah, you know me, I don't like to confirm
I know.
hypotheticals,
I
but
know.
this is one I will confirm. Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
yes. Yes. I consider
Absolutely.
that a win for Sean. But you see what I'm saying is like,
Yeah.
so here's where I was leading with if we were in court, there would have been a huge objection for leading the witness, um, but, uh, it makes me think about shift work.
Mhm.
In that, so are you comfortable talking about, or what about shift work and its effect on all of this?
Yeah, we can talk about that. I wish I could remember movie titles as well as you, because I
If you
can't remember
describe it,
them.
I
But
could probably tell you.
okay, it's Al Pacino. He's a detective in
It's called
Alaska.
Insomnia.
Insomnia. There you
Yeah,
go.
it's the name of it.
And there was another one that I think in a series or something, and it might have been in Norway or something. We haven't talked about this, but I have kind of fallen into this rabbit hole of watching Swedish, Norwegian, these different movies that are crime scenes, and they're limited series, like 4 to 6 episodes long.
Okay. Well, these
And
are from
they
my
are,
people, so I'm always on
oh,
board with that.
I
If it's
love
coming out of
these.
Scandahuvia, I'm a fan.
Well, I love these. And part of it is just because it's like challenging all my schemas, because the police that are dealing with people, I'm like, what are you doing? Don't walk up there. You don't have a gun. Like, you don't, I don't know, just all my schemas about how you deal with people. And it's challenging all of those. And it's more narrative heavy. I don't know.
Mm. Yeah.
I'm really
Yeah.
enjoying that. I have to read the subtitles, so maybe that makes me even pay attention a little bit more. But where was I going with that?
Well, you had brought up Insomnia. So
Oh,
Al
yes, yes,
Pacino
that's
is a
right.
detective who goes to Alaska to try to arrest Robin Williams, but he has
That's right.
insomnia, so
Yeah.
he can't sleep.
He's trying to pull curtains together, and so then he starts like hallucinating. He starts
Yep.
having all this, and those are all real. I mean, those are things that really do happen to you with
The
insomnia.
hallucinations.
It can come to that if you've missed enough sleep. Absolutely. Because yeah, well, there's lots of reasons for it. I won't get into that. That's
Okay.
getting too off the point, but even more so than Nordic mystery movies. But but no, it's when you think about that, when people struggle to sleep and they have they're trying to close curtains, and any little bit of light is just annoying you. It's because you can't get to sleep, and now you can't consolidate memories. Your performance is way down. It just has so many effects. So shift work, if you think about a person that is now working nights, and then they come off work and they go home, even if they have blackout curtains that they can shut, the trash truck is still going to come by during the day and beep, nah, 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 and then the traffic and people coming and going, and you're probably other people in the family are shutting doors and going, even if they're trying to be quiet. It's just, imagine if you're sleeping at night, but there's people up walking around and fixing stuff in the kitchen and shutting doors. You're like, I can't sleep. So it does have an effect. Shift schedules can be really difficult on workers.
Yeah. As you were talking, really crazy. I don't think that this isn't yoga that I have to stretch to make this work, but I worked graveyard for the first 7 or 8 years of my police career,
Ooh.
and at the same time, two little kids,
Mm,
2 and 4 ish, and so I would get home at 7 o'clock in the morning
mm.
ish, and my
Just in time
wife.
for them to wake up.
Yeah, my wife tried so hard to keep them quiet, but how do you? I mean, now this is what I meant about tying it together. Think about what was on your mind at the beginning of this episode,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and I feel like I'm bouncing all over the place, but I think I can kind of get there. But lack of sleep, because like you just said, I had blackout curtains, but I didn't sleep very well.
Mm-hmm.
Put that together over a few days, and a person gets grumpy.
Yeah.
They're a little bit more
Yes.
on edge. They're a little bit more, and thankfully, I don't know. My kids could probably tell you, but I don't think I really snapped at them or did any of that. But I could see how, not getting enough sleep, having broken sleep, and all of that over a course of several days or longer could make you more apt to yell at your kids or yell at your, whoever.
Absolutely.
And then you think about, and again, you were pretty clear in the beginning that it's not just those snap moments where you lose your temper, but I'm seeing how, like, shift work, and not even shift work. That was just a question, but lack of sleep,
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff kind of tied together, and how you could be more irritable, how you could snap at people, including
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah. And if you have breaks, or even like going into work, like you just don't even have as many options to stop and grab something to eat or to get a drink or what. I mean, just because the world's shutting down, but you're just heading into work. And so
Yeah.
it can be tough on a lot of different levels.
I don't know if I told you this, and I'm not, believe me, not trying to speak negative of anybody, but there are some police departments that I know of that they will have their officers work like day shift for 4 months and then go to night for like a couple of months or a month, and then go to, like, they move them around, uh, more rapidly. I mean, even because at the last apartment I worked at, it was every year you got to do a shift bid. So at least you were on the same shift for a year, solid. But I'm trying to imagine working at a place where like every couple of months you're on a different shift, going
Yeah,
back and forth.
the only thing worse than night shift is going night shift to day shift to night shift back and forth. That's almost
Yeah,
cruel and unusual punishment. Yeah,
yeah,
I did have somebody at the police department one time say, we don't want to favor one group of officers over the other, so everybody's on a rotating scale, and I think they said 12 weeks they shift schedules. So about every 3 months they're doing, and they just shift. They had 3 schedules. They shift from 1 to 2 to 3 back to 1.
yeah.
And
Because it takes a
so,
little while to get used to that shift,
yeah,
like what time you're getting up and what time you're going to bed, and then it feels like almost about the time I get used to it, I'm changing again.
yeah, absolutely. And when you switch from one to the other, like at first you go, okay, this is I can do this. This isn't that bad, because you're just that first day or two you're making that shift, but it takes a while for your body to adjust to it, and then you start
Right.
feeling that. Then you shift again. You go, okay, I guess this isn't that bad, but it takes longer. And then by the third time you're doing it, you're like, this stinks. This is yeah, it's really hard on your body,
Yeah.
really hard,
And
and yeah,
well, yeah, just going back to vision is tied to some degree to your internal clock.
yes,
That this just gave me another question that's a little outside of that, but the internal clock.
hmm
You said it's based on a 25 and a half ish hour cycle.
for most people, yes,
And then so light is what resets that clock.
yep.
And so
Which
we've
is why
already
you
talked.
can travel to another part of the world.
How did you know I was gonna? That's what
Oh,
I'm
is that okay?
asking.
Is that
No, go
okay?
ahead. That was
No,
going to be my question.
well, that's what allows you to adjust quickly to traveling to Europe, for example. And
Yeah,
when I say quickly, a few days. Yeah.
I just had some friends over. Our friends came over for dinner. They just came back from Japan, and when
Mm.
I say just, I mean like they were over on Sunday and they got back on Friday.
Oh.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they
Okay.
came over for dinner on
Yeah,
Sunday and they
yeah.
had arrived back in America on Friday. It was
Okay.
like that soon. And
Yeah.
they were just talking about like sleep. Like they on Friday night they went to bed and they were both staring at the ceiling and then each other at 4:30 in the morning. Like we can't sleep. And so I was going to ask you about what we call jet lag, but what we're
hmm
really talking about is your brain or your body trying to adjust to a difference in time zones, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so what's going on with that process?
Uh so but it's kind of the same thing, that your brain has to reset its clock. So
Interesting. Okay.
if you travel west, your 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 circadian rhythm, your body clock, more easily resets than when you travel east. So, and it's because I'm trying to remember the exact reason, but it's because traveling west prolongs the clock, so it doesn't. When you travel east, it has to reset sooner. When you travel west, it has to kind of like draw out longer, which then you can get back to
So
resetting it quicker.
this is confusing me a little bit. So just to no, this is just we
It's
got
your
to.
fault. You're the one that asked the question.
I know. But listen, I know, but let's put this in Sean terms for a second. So
Okay.
I live in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to fly to New York.
Okay.
It's roughly a 6-hour flight.
Mm-hmm.
When now wait, I might need more because the time of day I go might affect things, right?
Yes. Yep. It does.
Okay, but I'm flying east.
And that's why almost a lot of East Coast to West Coast, like Washington to New York, has more red eye flights. You can't really get red eye flights from New York back to Washington. So the red eye means you fly all night.
Right. So
because
if I jump on a plane at SeaTac here at midnight
mhm,
and I arrive in New York at 6 a.m.,
mhm,
roughly,
yep.
um, I'm not going to leave. See, time travel screws me up, right? I don't
So
like time
so
travel. I like sci-fi, but when I leave New York at midnight, I actually arrive in Washington at like what, 6. See what I mean? Time travel
yeah.
screws me up.
Yeah, because you already have a time change difference.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah. So I guess that I'm trying to think of a different way or a better way to say this. Time does make a difference. Like when we travel, when I've traveled to Europe, it's almost always you leave at night. Again, you fly overnight. Just like when you're going from west to east, it seems like there's a lot of overnight flights.
Okay.
So I arrive in the UK or in Scotland at 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. somewhere around there. When I've left, Boston or New York, wherever my connecting flight's out of, or Philadelphia, whatever, at like 10 o'clock the night before. I get in at 6 to 9 a.m., whatever.
Right.
Um, then it's like if you can sleep on the plane, it might help a little bit, but it's better if you can just stay up because you've ended a long day and then you kind of stay up on the flight. You can't really sleep. So now by the time you arrive, your body is going, okay, we've just extended way past our bedtime. We're way past bedtime right now. I've got to get sleep right now. And it's just the start of the day.
Right.
And it's trying to reset your clock at the start of the day when your body is so fatigued. And so that's why instead of prolonging, it's resetting. When you go from east to west, it's like you're getting there. It's like I had to stay up a little bit longer tonight, but I can now go to bed because you usually get in at later in the evening. Like when you're
And
coming
at night,
back,
this is starting to
yeah.
make more sense to me.
When you leave the UK, it's usually a morning flight, like 10 or 11 in the morning, and then you get in at like 10 in the evening. I'll get back in Kansas City, which it really is like now 4 o'clock in the morning UK time. So I
Mm-hmm.
just had to kind of prolong staying up, but now I can go to bed and get my full night's sleep and then get up the next morning and it resets easier.
Got it. I bungled the beginning of this with the time travel, but now I am starting to. I understand it. That makes
Okay.
sense. Yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean,
So,
again, I don't know whatever your beliefs are, but I don't, human beings in flight and, how we can get somewhere. I can get to New York in 6 hours. And you know what I mean?
yeah, we weren't built to be able to make those quick changes. Yeah.
No, I don't.
Technology has allowed us to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so I mean, flying to Scotland, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't know that as human beings that we've caught up with the technology ability to get on a plane and be anywhere in 14 hours or whatever. I don't know what Australia
No,
is. It's like,
even, yeah, well, way more than that.
but again,
But
you could do it in 16, 18 hours, whatever it is. I can be in Australia.
yeah, maybe
And I
even
just don't
less
know
than
if
that.
Sean's brain is made for this.
But I mean, isn't that the way with almost anything having to do with technology that it's always way out in front of us? I mean, just the phone, we're just talking about it. The phone, how it resets your clock when you pick it up at night. We weren't built to just have a little light device
Right.
that can reset our clock in the middle of the night. It's like once the sun went down or you put the fire out or whatever, it's dark until the light comes up the next day. So,
Yeah. I take my phone. I'm real sensitive about sleep. I think I bring up sleep a lot on the show because if I don't get at least 7 hours, but 8 hours over, if I have a dip one night or whatever, but I got to get my sleep. I'm just,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and so I have my phone, but it's on silent, on do not disturb. That's for my
mm-hmm,
alarm. I set it face down,
mm-hmm.
and we have blackout curtains in the room, and brown noise. I like brown noise, and playing, and I sleep. I sleep
Sleep
great.
really well. Good.
And I'm hoping that's not because I'm a sociopath, but it's because I've set myself up for some success. But
I was starting to say you either are guilt-free or a sociopath.
yeah, and like I said,
Probably
hopefully not.
guilt-free.
But
Hopefully it's
well,
guilt-free.
yeah, you never know. But when that, there are mornings that even with all of those conditions set, that just the right amount of light at the right angle, that sunlight just comes through, and I wake up. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
I'm awake an hour before my alarm. This is not.
Yeah.
This is not.
And
But
it's not as fun to. Well, I guess it's good to wake up if you've had enough sleep with the light slowly coming up. But when you haven't had enough sleep and all of a sudden a curtain opens and it's bright sunlight, that's not as fun to like
yeah,
wake up that way. But
yeah. So I had one more question that's not about vision, because I just brought up
Okay.
brown noise. Brown noise.
Okay.
Or white
Yeah.
noise. I don't even know the difference. You probably know the difference between the two.
I know white noise. I know green noise and white
Yeah,
noise.
this is brown. This is called brown noise. I don't know. I know that
Okay.
they're
Is it
moving.
so
If we're talking,
sounds?
it's sound. It's just like white noise.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, if let me try and do this. I've been having some success on the show lately. Let's see if I can push it. But you were talking about the frequency of light waves, right?
Uh-huh.
Long, medium, short. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that white noise, brown noise, green noise, all of those are different wavelengths of sound.
Of sound, but so sound is different from light as
Dang it.
far as wave. Well, in this sense, differing wavelengths relate to low pitch and high pitch.
Okay.
So wavelengths are, the shorter the wavelength, I believe, the higher the pitch, and so it's just those receptor cells, and it's tuned to a different part of the spectrum than sound is. And so when you catch that energy in that kind of that window that the cells in the cochlea can pick up, then that's where we get pitch and you can hear different sounds.
Okay. So I got to look it up. I don't know the difference between brown noise and white noise. I was assuming that it's the variation in frequency there.
Yeah, no, I think, well, I don't know. So white noise is kind of that static that's just like a static. And then I was thinking that one was more like birds and water, and is that the
No, it's
difference?
static. It just sounds a little bit different than white noise. The brown noise is.
So
Yeah,
look that up and find out. I would be interested.
yeah, I will. But that leads me to my final question for you. If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around, does it make a sound?
I love this question. I'm so glad you brought this back up because we kind of hinted at it last episode or the episode
but we're
before.
talking about sound right now.
Yeah. No, this is really good because it challenges the way you think about perception in the human brain. And just like objects aren't made up of colors, it's your brain's interpretation of the object, how the light strikes the eye. Sound is the qualities of sound, that the high pitch and low pitch is also a product of the brain creating that internal image of the sound. And so the question comes down to, I guess, what is your definition of sound? Because sound is usually the perception. It's not, so you have the physical wavelengths that are in the environment. And then when your receptor cells transduce that into neural energy, that's the perception of sound. So without a person there with receptors in their cochlea, that's still just physical energy, waves of energy. So when a tree falls, it just disturbs the air and the air moves differently.
Right.
But if a person is there, their receptor cells pick up that wave, that air movement. And
that air hits my inner ear,
compresses,
gets transduced, and there is a message sent to my brain that says that was this sound.
Yes, that crashing sound you hear is what your brain creates to represent that compressed air that just entered your ear. So the technical answer, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around, does it make a sound? The technical answer is no, it
No, it
doesn't make a
doesn't.
sound because sound is a perception. So it's kind of a trick question, but it's a fun question to think about in those terms because it makes you think about how the brain processes information. It takes physical energy and converts it into neural energy, and then that neural energy builds whatever internal image that represents the world for you to see or for you to
Yeah.
experience.
So I might not even be there yet. I was just getting comfortable with the idea that my shirt is not gray, that
Mm-hmm.
the threads aren't gray. And now you're dropping this on me.
Yeah, it's kind of fun though.
It is fun.
Once you start learning about it, then you're
I'm supposed to
challenging
be learning about the brain. That's
all
the
those
point of this
different things. Yeah,
podcast.
but
But,
then you can apply it to a lot of things, other
well,
sensory
yeah, all of art. I
systems.
was just going to say, you can apply that. I mean, it's the same. You're saying the same thing about audition, what I hear
Mm-hmm.
as my vision, and that goes to what I feel, and what I taste, what I smell. We don't have time. I'm getting to the end of our time right now, but it's interesting about taste.
Mm-hmm.
Is that some people like certain tastes and some don't like the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Just don't like that taste.
Yeah. No, that is. And I was going to mention on sound, you know how with vision, I said if you push the side of your eye, you can see spots because that law of specific nerve energy says whenever this cell is excited in some way, it sends a certain message.
Mm-hmm.
That's why sometimes when people, when they fall down, like they're on a skateboard and they fall and hit the back of their head and they see flashes of light, that's
Yeah.
because from there. But if they hit the side of their head, like if people sometimes when they're boxing say he rang my bell, it's that haymaker from the side that hits over the auditory cortex right above the ear that makes you hear sounds really loud because that's stimulating that. So that's again how your brain's creating your world, inside. But yeah, going to taste. There's a few tastes like sweet and salty and bitter, uh, and but there's another aspect to it which is flavor, and that's
That is
combining taste with
taste and
smell.
smell. I learned that
Yeah.
from you on this show.
Okay, we
I
talked
did
about that.
that.
All right.
I had never heard that before. Like so many things that I've heard in the last 25 hours, that
So
it
people
makes
who have a
complete
cold,
sense.
people who have a cold will say I can't taste my food, and
Mm-hmm.
technically, I hate always being the guy that does this. So I don't do this when people say that. I don't correct them, but just for the show, so that listeners know. Uh, Technically they can still taste because it would be salty. Like if you add a bunch of salt to their food, they'll taste that
Right.
because taste is like it's the flavor that they're not getting because if they have a cold, their nose might be stopped up, and so all they're getting is taste, and that's a lot different than what they're used to. They're used to taste and flavor.
Right. Their sense of taste is still intact. So
Mm-hmm.
to say I can't taste this, but it would be more appropriate to say I'm not getting any flavor from this, or
Yes, which sounds weird.
that does sound weird. There's a
And
lot of things that we say out of convenience that we don't really mean. And so, me as the words matter guy, I've got to let go of, I got to pick some battles here and not just run
yeah,
around correcting everything everyone says.
yeah, like colorblind is really color deficient because you're
Great
supposed to see
callback.
colors.
Yes. Yeah.
And I know that one of my professors in grad school and several people are like this. That when you're talking about the cones, the SM and L for the short, medium, and long wavelength
Mhm.
cones, people call them the red cones, the blue cones, and the green cones, and that drives them crazy because again, words matter, and those aren't red cones and they're not green cones. So yeah,
Yes.
and so flavor and taste are different.
Yeah, you could taste it. You just aren't getting the flavor in it that you're used to. But there again, like there's a lot of shortcuts that we take in the English language anyway. Um,
One other thing that you should know about is that
yeah.
smell is its sensory system is the particles that lodge in your nose. So it's not
Oh, I
light
don't
or
like this.
air.
I don't like this at all.
I thought you might enjoy that part of it. So
I don't like
whatever
this
you're
at all.
smelling, it's the
Mm-mm.
particles are in your nose at that point.
Mm. Why? You're going to end the show on that note?
No, you have something left to say. I might end my part, but
Oh.
you can rescue it. You can pull us out.
Oh no, I think that was a great ending. I just not for me. I'm sure the listener. See, words matter.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say listeners. There's
You said
probably one
listener.
person listening, but still, we are at we're just under an hour. But I feel like that's a good the particle discussion you just dropped on me is a good place to stop. But
all right.
no, thank you, because that was itching my brain. I that the whole vision and internal clock thing. I feel like I understand that better.
Yeah, and you were asking me questions today that made me flex my brain too a little bit to answer.
Good.
So yeah,
Good.
we should both just keep flexing our brains and keep this up.
I'm going to try. Thank you so much, John. And again, for our listener, you can. I don't know where you're listening to this, but we're on Spotify, we're on iHeartRadio, we're on YouTube, we are on Amazon. And so I don't know if anybody's preference is to look at us when we're doing this. It wouldn't be mine, but YouTube and Spotify, you can watch the video of this. If you just want to listen to the audio version, iHeartRadio and Amazon have the audio version, and Spotify has a button you can click for audio only too. So just trying to kind of meet people where they are. I don't know where people like to listen to podcasts, but if you are listening to us on one of those 4 systems, like, follow, subscribe, all of those things are going to help us. If you are enjoying this, then you can help us out by doing that. I forgot to mention on a few episodes ago, but our website, John teaches Sean about his brain.com. And the website's still relatively new. We're trying to add more content and stuff to it, but if you go there, you can find the show on there, find our bios or any information about the show, and you can also put your email in and click to get an email from me. If this isn't enough, you can get more. I can bother you some more, but again, tell friends, tell loved ones, tell anybody that you think would be interested in listening to me learn about my brain. And like I said, all of this just keeps us moving forward, and I'm really enjoying this. So I would like to continue doing it, but we can't do it without y'all. So until next week, everybody just keep flexing your brain, as John says, and we'll see you then.